Can we start, ma'am?
Sure.
Yeah. So, before we start to our main questionnaire, it would be great if you can introduce yourself. Like, please throw some light on your early life and childhood and basic education.
Awesome. So firstly, thank you so much for this opportunity. And like I said earlier, I'm really happy to see youngsters who are in college looking at complex topics of ranging from social entrepreneurship to sustainability and politics and a range of other things. Wish you luck and a lot of exposure on your journey so you can all come up with independent opinions and make a good impact and be great citizens of India. So coming back to your question, a quick introduction about me. My name is Anitha Shankar, and I'm today a founder of Astu Eco. We are into providing earth-friendly and sustainable alternatives to single-use plastics, and we've been in the market from 2019 as a private limited organization. Your question was about my childhood. It's been a really long time since somebody's asked me that question. Yeah, and my childhood has been really years ago, if you ask me now. I was born in 74 in Karnataka. I'm still in Bangalore. My dad was a professor in mathematics and has written many books. My mom was a very loving housewife, and I've had a great childhood. I have two siblings, a brother and a sister. And my childhood, if I can recollect, has been very happy, content. Has had its challenges, very middle class. But I think privileged because I can't remember having had to go through any trying times as such. I think it's because of the love that was provided in the house more than having too many things, you know. So I studied in school very close by, which was what used to happen earlier. We would all not go after a school. It was the community, wherever the school is, we would all be sent to that school. And I did my college in a place called Mount Carmel College. And post that, I did my MBA in the TAPI Management Institute. After that, I've basically always been a very adventure-loving person, nature person. In school, I think I was a very quiet backbencher kind of a person. But once I started getting into sports, I think I kind of came into myself, got a little more confident about exploring other things. And once I joined, I think NCC, the National Cadet Corps, that kind of made a huge difference to me. I came back from my first camp with a gold medal in firing, and I think that kind of fueled me to go deeper into these things which are more about exploring my ability, and that's how I started my journey on outdoor sports. I've done a lot of marathons and endurance events. Done my course in mountaineering and leadership. Done a lot of treks in the Himalayas and skydiving, bungee jumping, etc., etc. A lot of those. And though I started my career in a typical IT organization, moved out of the country for a couple of years and did a lot of in New Zealand actually, and that's an ideal place to explore adventure sports. I did a lot of that there. When I came back to India, I think that's when the whole trigger of what is it that we can do for our country kind of came up. Because if you're living in the country, you kind of blind to a lot of things. You grow up in that environment, you see kachara here, there, but you keep going and it's not so evident. But when I went out of the country and came back, suddenly it was very stark. The cities, it was very stark in terms of smells and kachara and plastic, and just the whole place was very different. And I think that's where the trigger started on what is it that we can do. And I think around that time, this was around 2006, there was always this trend that, let's go out of this country. Everybody were looking at aiming to go into Americas and other places. And I was quite sure after coming back that that's not what I want to do. I want to stay here and do something here. So I started, we had a group of like-minded friends. We started something called as Explorers Outdoor Ed, where we were working with children and young adults in outdoor education. We take them out on experiential courses and try and understand their own abilities and how we can stretch. What we think is our ability is always limited, but you are pushed into different places, then you always expand and you understand yourself more. I can do better. So those were the areas that we were working on, basically life skills for children and young adults. And it was a phenomenal time. We did quite well. Then I had my baby, and I kind of had to step back for a little bit because I needed to take care of him. And um, yeah, then we moved back to Bangalore after being in Bombay for some time, in Hyderabad and here. And here is when I kind of decided that I want to start something again. We did a couple of things, that I think around the time that we started in 2014, the thinking process, there was a lot of these challenges about terrorists and dunya mein kya ho raha hai kind of a thing. So we came up with a product which is called Joybury, like a jamboree, like where people come together, but it was Joybury. Basically, it's a box of any festival in the world. So any kind of festival that you can think of is in a box. And the idea was festivals are a time where it brings people together irrespective of their background, culture, everything. If you look at India, typically someone like me, I have celebrated Christmas and I've celebrated any festival that you think of. It's a part of our entire culture, Diwali and everything. And we invite, it doesn't matter from where they're coming, we invite everybody and everybody partakes in the festivals. So the idea was, if we can share about the festival and the intent of festival irrespective of the religion to other people, then they'll be able to appreciate that culture more, that heritage more. It could be a Hanukkah, it could be a Eid, it could be anything. And that did quite well, but unfortunately for us, when we started it with my co-founder, I think there was this Chennai floods that happened and we kind of went under. Festivals came, festivals went, we didn't get our stock on time. That was a dipping period. But what we went back and understood was, whatever boxes we did, we were always looking at, hey, ये box को हम waste नहीं कर सकते, इसका क्या करें? So it ended up being that every box would be completely used. So you would get your stuff for the festival. Like we started with Varalakshmi, then we did for Eid, and we did for a lot of other festivals. For Eid example was, it was a box with the typical things that people would give for Eid. There's this attar and some sweets and whatever, some envelopes which they give out to the kids. But once that is used, this becomes you could take it out and it could become a book stand for your Quran, and it would become a carry bag for your Quran. Wherever you go, your travel bag for your Quran, kind of a thing. So for the Varalakshmi festival, for example, whatever packaging was there, every bit would convert into a decor item for the festival. So there was some 30 pieces of items for the festival in it, but 30 other pieces of decor items would come out of it just from the packaging. Even the box that you would get for you, which is delivered by the courier, would convert into a newspaper stand, and very beautiful. And so we figured that we are focusing so much on reusability and stuff like that. So we went back to the table to figure out, we spent about a year's research actually on seeing what is it that we can do. And in the meanwhile, I have always been going into the mountains. Every year, the New Year's for me is in the Himalayas for me. I always celebrate there. But from 20 decades, right? So 20 years, what we've seen is every time I go there and come back, even in the most remote places where you don't find humans residing, you will still find plastic, and it's only increasing, right? And every year you can see it's just becoming more and more. So how much can somebody kind of, I would take a bottle or some piece of and collect and come back, but that's not something that would necessarily work. What we really needed was large scale awareness, and also a 1 years of research in that showed to us that it was easy for us to say don't use plastic, but what are the alternates available? And at that time, there were very few and far between. We also figured that it was much tougher for the businesses, right? For you and me, maybe it's not so difficult to start carrying a bag. It is not happening. That's a different issue, but it's not difficult. But for businesses, it's like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Even if they want to change, you're looking at an entire supply chain and cost and function. Like if I want you to ship ice cream in a sustainable pack to somebody who's staying 1 hour away, it's a challenge, right? Like that, there are a lot of other materials which are where you need to be more careful about what you're shipping. and very difficult to come out with packaging which is sustainable for that. So that's when we decided that we will do a lot of R&D research and come up with materials which are innovative and sustainable, affordable and available. So those are the 4 pillars that we started working with: sustainable, accessible, affordable and functional, most important. So that's when we decided that we will come up with a whole range of innovative products which can help people make simple, small switches in their everyday life for a larger impact. And that's how we are where we are today.
So like the
I think
whole
I have
story.
2 questions in the same thing. You asked about my childhood. I went into till Astu.
It's okay, fine. Like it's nice, like the way you explained everything, and it's really inspiring that you had the privilege to shift and stay abroad and have it like a normal life, what we say a normal life, but you still came back and like started working for like the cause for environment, etc., and for the country too. So like it was really inspiring.
I think
So
it's I think it's also to do with, your upbringing, right? Like I remember my mom was, we were all very patriotic in the house. We take a lot of pride in being Indian, our culture, our heritage. And that's the space also that I grew up in. And even as I grew up, because of NCC and a lot of other things, it was always predominantly there about what is it that we can do to our country. How are we contributing positively to our country? And it's so easy to get into despair and say इस देश का कुछ नहीं होगा, ये ऐसे government है, ये वो. But if you really sit back, each of us can do something, and that can make a significant impact. It's about how we look at it. How do we not necessarily waste time on blaming? Instead, can we look at what we can do? And that's probably the space that I come from.
yeah, like I totally agree. Like we as an individual too have certain responsibilities that we should follow instead of just keeping that blame and claim game.
Yeah.
So thank you, ma'am, for the question. And it's really inspiring to see how you are balancing everything and different versions and the adventurous aspect. It's just amazing to hear good stories. And I really relate to about the importance of a good household you're being brought up into, right? It completely changes your perspective. It gives you that exposure that we want. So, coming on to our question, we learned about the inspiration that came with us to Eco. Now, can you elaborate about its motive and about the services, its future vision?
Yeah. So we work on 2 prongs, right? Basically, one is to provide alternatives to single-use plastics. And I think in different periods of time, we focused on B2B and B2C, right? But eventually, if you look at any product, it will go to consumers, right? And we need to look at how do we inspire consumers, which is the largest in terms of the change makers, right? If you look at sustainability as a big picture and climate change, etc., right? Who are the people who can actually change? There are 3 parties involved. One is businesses, one is governments, and one is consumers. 3 large. If you do a Venn diagram, they all come together, and some change can happen. And as the years went by with us, what I noticed was the biggest chunk, which is the consumers, right? They are the largest in numbers, but they appear to be the weakest in terms of making a change. We are saying government ko ye banana hai, businesses ko rokna hai, inko wo karna hai. But here you see like 100 millions of people here, billion people, and why can't this billion people do something? Fine, there has to be momentum that has to happen from businesses and governments in terms of policies and everything, no doubt about it. And that's the only way this can mobilize and move in a faster direction, which is what is essential. But we should remember, in terms of stakeholders, each of them has significant responsibility to play, and consumers has the ability to change the game, because it's a demand supply thing. If we continue to ask for first take mujhe, where convenience itself becomes the biggest umbrella, where I'm saying, boss, mujhe ghar tak hi sab kuch chahiye, I don't care ये प्लास्टिक में आ रहा है कि you wrap it in whatever you want, मेरे को घर चाहिए, मुझे इधर फास्ट जाना है, मुझे. So everywhere, if you look at it, for us, convenience has overtaken the idea of being sustainable, right? And we need us all to relook at that. It's not anybody's fault, right? Because plastic came into all our lives so fast, and it is a phenomenal product. You can't disagree with that. You can see it in every industry today, from rockets to airplanes to toothbrushes, everywhere. So the problem is really not plastic. The problem is, where is it coming from, where is it starting, and where is it ending, right? So it's coming from natural resources, which is fast depleting, and we will all get into problems because of that. And the problem of managing end of life. And this managing end of life is largely a human problem. So it's not plastic that we should blame. Plastic is one of the most brilliant innovations of our times, if you ask me. The problem is where it's coming from and where it's ending. And can we relook at these two and make it better? And I think firstly, to relook at how it is ending. If we can connect this and correct this, I think that if we can fuel it back, can relook at circular economy, that would probably make it easier, because I don't see plastic going away. Right. So if you look at what is the government doing right now, they are doing the 80-20 rule. 20% of the products is creating 80% of the problems, right? And they are working on all three levels, in terms of policies, in terms of looking at how can we help mobilize the businesses to become more sustainable, and also looking at how do we give more awareness to consumers and things like that. So, which is why I think we first honed in on the single-use plastic. Single-use plastic is one of the largest contaminants. And if you look at the top 10 single-use plastic problems, those are the ones that is causing 80% of the problem. So that's where they've honed in on that, and not only in India, across the world, right? And here we've banned a lot of single-use plastics. But just banning is not enough, because you just can't expect the government to do everything, irrespective of who's sitting on top, right? You can't expect just the government to do everything, because it's not always going to work with a stick method. Banning is not the best method always. It has to be a carrot and stick method, right? So, because the minute you start blaming people and saying stuff, there's always going to be a defensive mechanism, which you need to see how can we nudge people to move in that direction. And it's always much more challenging, like I said earlier, for businesses to convert quickly, because you're looking at changing an entire supply chain. And you're also looking at so many people working, like let's say a factory which has always been making plastic something cups, right? Overnight, we are saying now, stop it all. This is creating a problem. And they have 2,000 people working with them, and they have tons of supply that they've spent money on and kept raw material. It's not going to work that way, because what happens to the employment? What happens to this businesses? So it's not necessarily the best way to quickly remove stuff. We need to give them time so they can find alternate methods and move forward, which is what I suppose largely businesses are being allowed to do. But consumers, I think, needs to really pull up our socks. We need to understand that small changes from our side in our everyday life can make a big difference. And that is why we need to continuously build awareness. I think that awareness is happening. Like today, for example, if you go to your classroom and ask them, boss, do you know about climate change? Kitne log haath utayenge? Haath utayenge na sabhi log? If you ask them environmental problem क्या है, हाथ उठाएंगे ना सभी लोग, पर कितने लोग इसका कुछ कर रहे हैं? There is a problem here. Everybody knows what's the problem, what's good for us, what's good for the earth, what's good for the country. सबको पता है, पर क्या कर रहे हैं उसके बारे में? Very little, right? So that is the space that we're working at. The knowing doing gap, we call it. सबको पता है कि plastic toothbrush in a year. Let's say how many people in your college?
Around 4,000.
4,000 people in your college. All of them will be using toothbrush. And in a year, they will change at least 4 times or maybe 3 times. So 12,000 toothbrushes. Iska kya hota hai? Directly 12,000 toothbrushes goes into landfill. Can you imagine how big is a 12,000 toothbrush? You do the calculation. You put it into a visualized metrics, because that's the role that you guys have to play if you're really working on sustainability. Because people don't understand climate change. Ye sabhi samajh mein nahi aata hai. It's a very far off concept. You have to help them visualize. You put 12 toothbrushes. Kitna bada ho jata hai, right? Now you make it 120 toothbrushes. Then you make it 1,200. Then you make it. So if you make that, it's probably going to fill up your entire classroom in 1 year. And only one college. So can you imagine what happens entire Delhi ka kya ho raha hai in 1 year? Can you imagine for the country what is happening? That much is the amount of single-use plastic, only toothbrushes we are talking of, that's getting generated, right? And what happens to these toothbrushes? Nothing for the next 1,000 years, correct? And there's nothing we can do. But if we can collect it back, maybe, I don't know, redo something with it, reuse it, even that can happen only to that extent. And then there's a whole story of carbon emission, blah, 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 blah. You know, it's a complex process. So which is why we need to curb it in the beginning. If you all shift to bamboo toothbrushes, right? The bristles are still toothbrush. I think world over, we've not figured out a convenient solution for that. Unfortunately, we are all working towards it, and I hope that we come up with something. But we are still decreasing 95% of that. If each of you change just to bamboo toothbrushes, can you take that up as a challenge for Delhi University? Right? You just think about it. You know, this is a brilliant opportunity for you guys. You can really be student leaders for sustainability. If you can say by next year, Delhi University will not be using plastic toothbrushes. And you are making a huge service to your country and the municipal bodies. You know how difficult it is for the municipal bodies to collect these small single-use plastic. They go berserk. We cannot keep saying, ye kya kar rahe municipal body? No, it is a big challenge. Do you know what is the #1 single-use plastic contaminant globally? Take a call, take a bet.
Plastic bags.
Is in the top 10. Shreya? Take a guess, don't Google.
Even sanitary napkins.
100%, right? So we have all these different single-use plastic that's just clogging our drains and our landfills and stuff like that. But the #1 is actually cigarette butts, which never can be even collected. They're tiny but deadly. And usually what happens, somebody smoking, they flick it like how they show in the Hollywood, Bollywood movies with a bomb blast in the back, right? And as a style, cigarette ke wo chala jata. We need to look at how can we reverse that narrative. If we can put it into a box and responsibility put it into a dustbin, because the Porva Karmikas cannot collect this. It's small. Where all will you go and pick it up and bring it? It's 4 trillion we are talking of butts that's being discarded every minute. So it's a huge challenge that we're talking of. And unless consumers support governments and businesses, it's an uphill task for anyone. So I think what Astu is trying to do is to see how do we help these consumers, which are the largest in terms of numbers, and we can make that difference to our countries and our cities. How do we mobilize and motivate these people, to all of us, right, to understand the problem? One, that is why we work on 2 prongs. One is to build awareness, the other is to provide alternates. One is to give them an understanding with visualization. Otherwise, it's a very abstract concept for people. They feel ये हमारा problem नहीं है. अरे उधर floods हो रहा है, sewage हो रहा है. Why is the government not doing anything? But the problem is the same earbud that we have thrown, the same toothbrush that we have thrown, the same plastic bag that we've thrown has clogged the drains. And that is why there's floods and other things happening, right? So that realization, once we put it in, then nobody wants to really harm the environment. The awareness needs to be built. Once we do that, and then we also provide with alternates, then we can help switch to more sustainable lifestyles. So like I said, there is this clear knowing doing gap. Everybody knows what's good for the earth, but when it comes to doing, there's a gap. So how do we help bridge this gap is what Astu is trying to do.
Yeah, like totally got it. And like it's really nice and innovative, like not even just selling products, but also like creating sensitizations or making people realize their own mistake. Like not only blaming will work, you too as an individual should have to take up the call and like work towards the environmental destruction and climate change.